Hey, so good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my messy desk, to desk slash bench where I do my work. But I would like to share with you today this lovely Dynaco SCA-35 that came into the shop. It came for a recap, for a full recap, and some TLC. We're going to clean the switches, we're going to clean the pots, maybe change the output tubes. But before we get into that, and later on I'm going to open the top and show you the whole thing, I would like to talk to you guys about this particular amplifier here because it's a very good purchase. This amplifier here is the underdog of the Dynaco family. When you talk about Dynaco, people immediately think of the Stereo 70s, which are amazing amplifiers. I had a pair of those and I regret selling them. But this amplifier here has only half of the power of the Stereo 70, but it's got some real cool features. First of all, it's an integrated amplifier, so it comes with a preamp section, which means you don't need to buy any extra equipment, apart from your speakers, of course. So you buy this amplifier and right out of the bat you can start using it. And that's pretty cool as well. It's got loudness, balance, bass and treble, so full tone controls, and it behaves just like a solid state amplifier. So for someone who's coming from a conventional solid state world and is about to start to debut into the vacuum tube amplifier world, this is actually the one to go for. And since it's not very famous, it's actually really cool because it's a lot cheaper. You can purchase this amplifier for a good price, for a very reasonable price. In fact, the gentleman who purchased this amplifier is a friend of mine here in Brazil, and he purchased this amplifier for a very interesting price. And will require some work, of course, but not a lot. And the coolest thing about this particular unit that I have here is that it's in almost original shape. It's in great condition. I would not dare to say mint condition, but close to. The only thing that has been done here, and I hate that, is that the former owner has put a horrible shiny lacquer on top of it. And it's horrible. It looks like a Chinese toy, all glossy and cheap. But we'll take care of that. We'll take care of that. And I would advise you to, if you ever come across one of those units, grab it because it's an amazing amplifier. It's really underrated, so you can get it very cheap, and it performs really good. We hooked this amplifier here when it came to a pair of ProAct clones, and it performed really well, even with some minor problems. It still has all the stock capacitors on it, which will have to go immediately because this unit is from late 60s, early 70s, so those caps by now are jumpers, not caps. And this is actually really dangerous to run an amplifier with bad capacitors because you're going to leak DC from the driver stage into the grids of the output stage, and you're going to cook your output tubes away. And if you're a little unlucky, you're going to cook your output transformer as well. So things can get very expensive very quick. But enough talking, let's show how it works. I'm going to pause the video, open the top, and show you. So here we have the Dynaco SCA-35 with its top off, and you can appreciate the insides of it. I find it actually more beautiful than the outsides of any amplifier. And here we have the power transformer. There's something about that. The power transformer on this amplifier, in my opinion, was underrated. It's small, it will get warm, it will get hot eventually, but it will get even hotter now than it did back in the day, because when those amplifiers were built, and that was 60s, 70s, the line voltage was 110, and today we're working with a line voltage of 127, and those extra 15, 17 volts, they will make a difference. They will put a stress on your amplifier, especially in the power transformer, but also in the output tubes, sometimes even in the output transformer. So the best way to deal with that problem, in my opinion, is to wind a transformer, custom wind a transformer, and get a tap. You can do an auto transformer. It's very easy. There are formulas on the internet. It's very easy to do that. And you get a tap where you're going to get your 110. And that's it. It's just very simple. Those amplifiers don't require a lot of power, so any 250, 300, I would be more comfortable with 500 watts, but any small transformer will take care of that task, and you'll be a lot safer, and you will have your amplifier for a lot longer. Here there's something I would like to point. Those tubes here, those two tubes here, are the 7199s. Those vacuum tubes are a little hard to find these days, and they can be replaced, but in order for you to replace those tubes, you would have to rearrange the wires. They are not pin compatible. Those tubes are multi-section tubes, and they have the first half of those tubes is a pentode, and the second half is a triode. So what happens is that the first section of the tube, the pentode section, works as a voltage amplifier, and the second section works as a phase splitter. And that's how you get your whole amplifier in this tiny little board. So here you have 17199 and a pair of EL84s, or 6BQ5s. And that's it. That's the whole amplifier right there. This board here is the preamp we're going to talk about later. But it's a very small footprint, but capable of performing just as much as a big amplifier. This circuit here comes from the original Mullard 510, which is amazing. It's a legendary amplifier. But this circuit, in my opinion, outperforms the 510, and it is a lot smaller and uses one less tube. So that's something to consider as well. Those output tubes, they can be a little deceiving. When you see the 6BQ5, the L84, you think, well, that tube is very small. It's never going to put out as much power as I need. And that's not the case. Those tubes are capable of delivering 21 watts in push-pull at reasonable distortion levels. So for most people, 21 watts RMS is a lot. It's actually more than you will need in most occasions. And there's an advantage to those tubes as well, because those tubes are reasonably priced. They're easy to find. They were mass produced because those tubes were also used in very cheap radios in the output section. So you can find good vintage tubes at a decent price today, and that's something to keep in mind. For instance, if you have a Stereo 70, which uses EL34s, 6 CA7s, those tubes are amazing, and they outperform those tubes, no questions asked. But those tubes are a lot more expensive, and it's going to be very hard for you to find a pair of vintage EL34s in good shape, whereas the EL84s, you can find them quite easily. I actually have a stash of them. So yeah, another advantage for this little amplifier. 7199s we've covered. Now, back in the preamp board here, we have a pair of 12AX7s. And that's it. Those tubes are there to work as a phono preamplifier. That's the main function. But when you change the positions here on this selector switch, on the source switch, you're not only changing the source, you're actually rearranging the feedback network in the preamp section. And by doing so, you're actually using the same set of tubes to perform a whole different function. Because when you're in phono section, those capacitors and resistors are arranged in such a manner that this works as a phono preamp with a frequency compensation. But then when you switch to radio or to spare is actually the way they call auxiliary input. When you change the sources here, it rearranges that network, and the same tubes will perform like regular preamplifiers, regular line preamplifiers. So that's pretty clever. When you do that, you're actually sparing a couple tubes. You don't need 2 extra tubes. You can just use the same ones, and not a lot of people did that, and that's another point for Dynaco. This amplifier has been recapped. I went and checked all the capacitors. I lifted one leg and did insulation tests and capacitance tests and ESR tests, and those that were in decent shape stayed, and those who really needed to be replaced went. The thing is, if you see here, I have replaced only the coupling caps on the output section. Those caps were actually good. They tested good. They were rated 0.1 microfarads at 400 volts, and I have a high voltage power supply here, and I tested them, and they were good. They perform good. They perform really well. The problem is, this is a critical position in any amplifier, and whenever I have an amplifier here in my shop, first thing I do is I replace those caps, and there's a reason for that. I don't like to go around replacing things that don't need to be replaced. My philosophy is that if it's working, don't fix it. But those capacitors are very dangerous, because if they ever become leaky not in the physical sense of leaking electrolyte, especially because those are film caps, but leaky in the sense that they will leak DC into the other stage, Well, the other stage in this case, here's the grid of the output tubes. And if you have anything different than a negative voltage, a negative DC voltage, and the AC signal, those tubes will go completely out of control. They will red plate, and you will lose your vacuum tube pretty soon, and sometimes you can even lose your output transformer. So that's a risk. Those parts are very cheap today. It's very easy to find, and I don't see why I shouldn't replace them. It doesn't take a long time, okay, half an hour, 1 hour, you go in there, replace all those caps, you're good to go. You have 20, 30 more years, and you don't have to worry. Because if I have a capacitor like that here today, and it's good, it tests good, it doesn't mean it will still work properly within 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, 48 hours, you don't know. Those things, when you purchase them, especially this unit here was purchased at a very interesting price, they have been sitting in storage, and if they have been sitting in storage, they have been sitting in storage for a reason. And you don't know what. You switch it off, you put it in storage for 30 years, for 20 years, you switch it on, it works. You get sound on the other side, on the other end of it, and you actually get good sound because this is a vacuum tube amplifier. And you say, well, it's perfect. As a matter of fact, it's not. It might work now when it starts to warm up. Those capacitors start to leak DC, and all of a sudden you have a blown output tube or a blown output transformer, and you don't know why. Well, that's actually the reason why. So those caps are the first thing that have to be changed. Those two caps here, the multi-section caps, I checked them, they were good. I could reform them. This multi-section cap here is a little interesting. It's got the high voltage sections for the power supply, for the preamp. This is for the pi filter. No, this is actually for the pi filter and output board, and this is for the preamp. Thing is, one of those sections is a very low voltage section that works with the cathode resistor on the output tubes. And if that capacitor shorts, well, your output tubes will be out of bias and they will cook. So I don't want to take that risk. I knew that that section was good, but I clipped the lead off from the bottom of the capacitor and installed a brand new capacitor. Then again, cheap part. You will be a lot safer, you'll be running a lot cooler, so there's no reason why we shouldn't do this. Another thing that I appreciate a lot on those amplifiers is this part here. This is very common of American amplifiers. They're very serviceable. They're built with service in mind, and this is something I appreciate, and I regret we don't do this anymore today. Here, when I clean those pots here, and maybe I have to solder a wire again, whatever. Whenever I have to work here, I don't have to take anything off. I don't have to take anything apart. Everything here is just perfect. Check it out. I can come here with my needle bottle and clean those spots. I can poke around here to see if there's a bad connection. I can put a soldering iron here. It's very easy to work. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to flip the amplifier and show you the back. Okay, so this is the bottom of the amplifier. You can see here you have your auxiliary outlets. One of them is switched. I kept the original power cord. Here you go. It's not flaky. It's in good condition. I'm going to keep it. I know it's not a 3-prong connector, but I will keep it anyway. I prefer to keep it stock. That's the capacitor I replaced. I told you guys about. This is the cathode bypass capacitor. This is the cathode bias resistor. This amplifier has a little weird arrangement, and I don't like that arrangement that much, but I prefer to keep it stock, so I'm not going to change it. This is the bias resistor for the output tubes, and they have the way they have it wires that they put all of the 4 cathodes in parallel, and then they go through this bias resistor, and you should read it's a 95 ohm resistor, and you should read about 11 to 12 volts there. Wow, that's the way it works. I don't particularly like this design because that forces you to use a matched quad of tubes in the output, and since I enjoy stashing tubes and then using old tubes, using vintage tubes, I prefer an arrangement that allows me to use matched pairs or even sometimes individual tubes without matching at all. There's a way to do it. Some people say it's not possible. It is. It's not recommended, but it's possible. If you build a negative power supply and you use individual controls for each output tubes, and then you can use different tubes. You just set the plate current for each tube individually, and then you're good. You're going to have to check on it every once in a while, but Works perfect. I have that thing going on in this very amplifier I built here. Don't mind the chassis. The chassis is horrible. This is an Acrosound clone. Uses 6098s or 6AR6s in the output tubes, in the output section, and you have those pots here, those trim pots here. Therefore, one for each tube, and this way you can keep it very well balanced, and those tubes last a lifetime, and you get very low distortion. You get very good results. So yeah. There's a way there's a way to get away with different tubes, but it requires a special power supply, special negative power supply. So back to this amplifier. It will go back to the customer today. I think he will be very happy with it. And I think the next thing we'll have to do here is just change the output tubes. And that's it. Another word of caution. I think I already said that, but I'm going to say it again. It's not earth grounded. The chassis is not earth grounded, so be careful. Okay, the safest way to use this amplifier would be to put a 3-prong power cord in here, but I prefer to keep it stock. That's why I'm not doing it. Okay, I know it's a risk, but I'm taking the risk because I prefer to keep it stock, and also because the owner wants to keep it stock. The guy who owns this amplifier thinks about selling in the future and said, wait, let's keep it as stock as possible. Okay, so that's why I'm not changing the power cord. I hope you guys have enjoyed this this little video. It's the first video on the channel. I hope I will have more videos to show. I'm willing to see your suggestions, your feedback, ideas, comments, whatever. Please, let's get in touch and exchange about this lovely passion of ours that's vacuum tube amplifiers. So that's it. Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed. See you next time. Have a great time. And please remember to like it, share, and subscribe. See ya.